because when you make a model for where you are, or when you are, or whatever, of course you're using a lot of math, but are you also using some way that some hunch that you thought maybe it wouldn't be infinite? And what
yeah, so the premise, the scientific premise of the book is that the universe might not be infinite. You know, Einstein had this famous quote, he said only two things are infinite, the universe and human stupidity. And then he's like, and I'm not so sure about the universe. And he realized that it's not impossible the universe was finite. I mean, once you go and start talking about relativity of space and time, I mean, anything's possible. So it was always planted, people had talked about it, but to some extent the mathematics didn't exist until even the 70s and much later. And we sort of started to rethink about the topic, and by we, I just mean, you know, a group of random people happened to kind of start thinking about it similarly. Maybe the universe really is finite.
Random people?
Well, we all knew each other, okay, so it wasn't totally random, but you know, even now, I don't know that the universe is finite, and I would be cautious to say I believe it's finite. I wouldn't even say that. I would just say that I believe it's a possibility. It's a realistic possibility that we have to lay out on the table of possibilities. The universe was born, it was created. Maybe it came out finite like all of its progeny, as opposed to trying to imagine that it was somehow instantaneously infinite. No,
so your own finite life gave you that feeling, or?
Yeah, I mean, we
as
infinity's
a creature,
actually
stardust creature, or what?
Sure, you know, we're these finite things made up of a very specific history. You make reference to stardust, but you know, it's really true. We're made up of stuff from stars. You know, we're a very specific place in time and in space. You know, and we couldn't be here 10 billion years ago, and we probably can't be here 10 billion years from now. Especially since we're going to collide with Andromeda. There's a great picture of Andromeda in the exhibit, actually. We're going to collide with Andromeda. Sorry about that.
When is that?
I don't know. I think it's like a few billion years. A few billion years. But a friend of mine called me and was like, I'm so disappointed that you think the universe, you know, as though I had committed a moral sin, you know. How can you think the universe is finite? It's like, I don't want it to be finite. I don't even like it. It's just, it might be, you know. I have to face the harsh reality of it.
Well, I mean, do you find that theories can have a morality to them?
In some sense, no, and I think that's what's appealing, that it's harsh and cold-blooded in that way. That,
well, facts are, but our theories, facts are pretty cold-blooded.
Yeah.
Theories to me always have some warmth in them, you know, like it could be that way because I feel it could.
Well, I think
you give it life by giving it the possibility, so you're giving it something warm, you know.
Yeah, I mean, somehow. I think that when I mean, you can speak to this too. When you're theorizing or narrating about something, or collecting information. Your passage that was just read about the stars. We know facts about the stars, but you are the one who cast it that way. You know, you saw it and cast it in that narrative, and that makes it a whole other thing. So there's a truth to that why is this interesting and why is this meaningful and why do we even want to ask questions about the origin of the universe or where we came from or
okay, so let's say it's not moral, but would it be aesthetic somewhat?
Yeah, for sure. They're for sure aesthetics. And I think it's the last place you can talk with a straight face about things being beautiful, right? I mean, isn't the art world really quite critical of the notion of things being beautiful? No, I know a lot of artists who love beauty and who try to make beautiful things that inspire people. But we are talking about the New York art world, so you're right. You know what I mean.
Yeah. But one thing that one of the very few sort of fun experiences that I had at NASA, being this artist in residence, as Tim very nicely put it, the first one, but it was also the last one. I can imagine the implications of that, you know. I was like, not doing that again. Which I think they asked me to do this because it would be I'd make some sort of sexy techno multimedia whatever, you know, bounce satellite from one satellite onto another, onto the dark side of the moon. So when I told them I was going to write like a long poem, they were like, why? Why would you do something like that? But some of the great conversations I had there were, and I want to bring this up because you're in love with Einstein. You're always quoting. It's so wonderful. I try to curb it, actually. I catch myself and say, just don't say his name. So one of the things that these nanotechnologists kept repeating, which was really odd, was they said that Einstein had rejected some of his major theories because he said they weren't beautiful. And I thought, what's he looking for then? I mean, and what does he think is beautiful? Symmetry, or what kind? Is it a Western type of beauty? Is it a mathematical, pure beauty? Are you familiar with that thing that with that aspect of his aesthetic choices?
Yeah, I mean, I think Einstein thought very simply, which is also why he's so compelling, because, mathematically, obviously, it's very sophisticated, but that wasn't where he started with the ideas. He started very simple thought experiments, just imagining being in the woods, looking at the light falling from the trees, being on a light beam, just what would he see? And he thought of it in a very childlike way. It gives you this hope that maybe we can all do that, that just thinking simply and innocently. And what was beautiful about Einstein, which really was special, is that he wasn't burdened by the authorities of the time. And he knew what was popular opinion, and Newton, for Christ's sake, Isaac Newton said the universe was a certain way. There was nothing that indicated Newton was wrong in any way, or Newtonian thinking was wrong in any way. There was really no evidence for it. And still, he chips away at it because something bothers him inside. And, you're talking about it's very intuitive. It was almost palpable. Something subtle wasn't right about the nature of time, the nature of light. Very simple things. Very simple
in the
things.
way of just didn't hit him right.
But it was very simple. His idea was one of symmetry and beauty. It was a very simple, almost a simple idea. Two astronauts float past each other in space. How do you tell which one's moving? And he thought about this, and Galileo even thought about this. But he thought about this he upped it a level. There's no way either of you can tell which one's moving. In fact, you don't feel like you're moving at all until that astronaut floats by you. Now it's you. Okay, it was two astronauts, now it's you and an astronaut. Before that astronaut floated by you, you wouldn't have known you were moving. There would have been no meaning to your motion. And the other one's going to look at you and say, anyway, so he goes, he chips, he thinks about light in that context, and he says, this is so important that I'm going to give up on space and time being absolute. And that's a huge leap to make. So it was, he definitely thought about symmetry, elegance, and deep and very simple principles.
I love that you quoted him as his own opinion of his childhood, which you were saying is he had this childlike kind of innocence and curiosity, and that he was kind of a deadbeat as a student, and he said, well, in his own words, I was no Einstein.
Yeah,
I love that you quoted that
brilliant.
in the book. But also, when you say symmetry, it seems to me such a cultural thing, because if you take that idea to Japan, in Japanese aesthetics, let's say, symmetry is considered idiotic. It's what they're going. Why do you Westerners like things that rhyme? You have this column and that column. They look just alike. Why? Because you have a bicameral brain, two legs, a bunch of two hands. Is that what you like about it? Because it looks like you. So beautiful. But what if Einstein was Japanese? Would it be more like their idea of two things, how two things can relate, something really big and really small, or some perhaps different way that they might affect each other, rather than just sitting there inertly rhyming. So do you think that his aesthetic was slanted what he could see?
I'm going to say two completely contradictory things, because why not? You guys can take me to task in the question and answer session. But,
and that's a very important part. We're really looking forward to this, especially from people who have a Buddhist point of view about free will. We're going to talk about that from a Buddhist point of view.
No problem. We're going to clear that up today. But we talked earlier, and I said one of the things that is so appealing to me about science, when I was a philosophy student in college, and what kicked me over to the other side of science, and I thought physicists memorized equations and built bombs and were, uptight and rigid men with coats. And,
men, yeah.
I like men, don't get, I even like uptight men, but
I have a question about that later.
There's something about science. What switched it for me was that it was absolutely transcendent in the sense it did not matter who you were, where you came from, what language you spoke, what century you were walking around in, that 1 + 1 was going to be 2. And there was something about that that seemed to speak not just to the structure of our minds, it was, my thinking was that it reflected something outside of us, that our minds were shaped by this external thing called mathematics, and it's still a great mystery. The mathematics seems to guide the running of the world. It's incredible. And what I loved about it is, Ramanujan coming out of that small town in Madras, like we were talking about, just out of nowhere, reinventing calculus, reinventing mathematics. And the reason why they accepted him to Cambridge, he was one of the great mathematicians of the last century, was because they were reading his essays, and it was like, yeah, he's saying all this true stuff about mathematics. But somebody's like, do you think he had books on this? And it suddenly dawned on somebody that he didn't have access to any of the written material about this mathematics. He had reinvented it all. So he comes to Cambridge. It's astounding. It's absolutely astounding. So it speaks to something that seems to connect us in a very deep way. So in some sense, I would say it doesn't matter where you're from. Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to completely contradict myself by saying, but surely, yes, we all bring things to the table, and there are people who are the ones who make those great discoveries and have thought about things in a totally different way from anybody else, and they're bringing with them everything they have, and maybe part of that's their cultural notions of beauty, and maybe part of that's just some strange artifact of their childhood, but they bring all that machinery when they make that creative leap and they look at something in that totally new way.
Well, especially when you're trying to describe space, as you are, or just trying to find a model for things. I'm just thinking of just another cultural way to look at, let's call it space for a second, or just a room, or a person in a room, like conceptualizing whether it's the Earth in the universe or whether, and in working a lot in Japan, I really just found a lot of different grammatical models. For example, like if there was, which made me realize I came from the other side of the world, which was the side of the world, the Greek side of the world, where we have their tradition of ego, hero, the center of this kind of your own cosmos. When we would be having an argument in Tokyo about some project that we were working on, they would never say Dave is angry or Kira is angry. They would say there was anger in this room. And I thought that was a really interesting way to describe forces and people and space, and that it was much more a way that I understood. Because it comes around, it moves, it's something that moves through you. You are not angry yourself. You're not anger yourself. It moves through you like a wind, like it, like, I don't know the name of this Balzac book, I can't remember, but it starts out with a beautiful image of a breeze that comes through town, and it's kind of like a malevolent breeze, but it comes through the butcher shop, and then it sneaks under the door of her house, and then it goes passing through someone swirling around his head, and all the ways that connect people that are very different ways of conceiving person in space that we have as Westerners. So if and I can imagine you're feeling both ways about these laws that are impervious and the other ones that are cultural, that you kind of say, well, they're both true, and you're not sure. Because it is, I think we feel tugged in a lot different ways that way.
Do you feel like that when you're composing or you're writing, that there's a dual play of bringing what you have to bring and also touching something universal? I mean, do you feel that at all as a kind of dual?
I'm a miniaturist, and I don't go for universal stuff. I go for details, and I love just little tiny details of things, and I hope they mean something to other people. But big words are things I try to sneak around rather than use them. They're abstractions, so I like to see what they are. I mean, the word free, back to this free thing, it's just that the word free is so baffling. I mean, it means sort of absence also, like this dog is free of fleas. What does it mean? Free, anyway. but we're going to get to that when we solve free will. So,
Right.
can I ask you something? I'm only on question 1 of the 600 questions. Your book is so beautifully woven between
Thank
your
you.
personal life and your theories, and you have this like love story with Warren, who is this kind of very distracted, strange musician, and he comes and goes, and it's very touching the way your relationship is part of you as you build your worldview. So, and then of course friends are asking you at the end of the book. So, does it really change your life when you? How do you apply that? Now that you know that or that you speculate that it's finite, does it change your life? But one other thing I liked about Warren, and then it turns out she married Warren.
Yeah, I know. We were sitting with the mics on. I was like, I'm going to tell you the secret. I married Warren. Yeah.
A guy who is so lost. In the book he's pictured as so lost, and I was like so shocked when he said, "We're married. We have 2 kids." I was like, "You did." So, this is a real shocker in his book. She married Warren, who they said that.
He's sitting right over there. No, I'm just kidding. He's not
here. You said that you were going to tell your parents that he was a magician, so that when you told them he was a musician, it wouldn't be so bad. This book is really funny. She's really, really funny. It's so wonderful.
I think they kind of wished he was a magician.
He's a luthier, right? He's a luthier.
Yeah, he's a luthier, so he builds instruments. Yeah. Do I have to talk about Warren right now?
No, but just the concept. Why did you bring your personal life into this book? Not that I don't love it. I do love that it's so touching that you did that. But why did you decide to do that? Because it's really an unusual choice.
Yeah, it was at the time that I wrote the book. I was pretty recently out of graduate school, and I was not a professor, and so I was not in this position of, the great scientist coming down from the mountain with the tablet, dusting up and recollecting of my great achievements. It wasn't that kind of a book, and I wanted to strike a tone that was very natural and personal, and it just sort of ended up kind of coming out that way as a, part letter writing kind of exercise and part story of the research. And I think also in particular for that research it made sense because I knew that it might be the case that the universe was infinite, and all this research I had been doing on the possibility, right, was like, that's it, oops, the data comes back, it's infinite and it's over, and I just felt these are beautiful ideas, these are huge ideas, and they shouldn't just die because they're wrong, shouldn't be a black mark on them forever. And there was part of me that thought, well, what's the way to tell the story about ideas that may or may not be true or right? And the way to tell the story is through the process of, doing the research. And the truth about doing the research is that it's alienating. You're alienated from your normal life. You're alienated from other people to a large extent. And so I wanted to kind of tell that aspect of it, I guess.
What's your favorite wrong science?
My favorite wrong science?
Yeah. Like that you still find poetically moving, but it's like wrongity wrong.
Oh, that's actually a tough question. Yeah. Oh, that's a tough question. There were a lot of very technical ideas, so I don't know if they'll sound that exciting, but there was something once called Technicolor, a suggestion about subatomic particles. It was just so beautiful. Technicolor had to be right, but it turns out it's wrong. It's just wrong. It doesn't work. Lots of things like that. Einstein introduced something into his theory to stop the universe from expanding, famously, and he was wrong. But actually, that's come back again. So, it's something that now we think looks like dark energy. But it was so interesting that in a way it couldn't go away. It wasn't right of him to try. He tried to stop the universe from expanding, and that was wrong. The universe is in fact expanding. But that little thing he did kind of sat around for a long time, and it turns out that we see something kind of like that today in the form of dark energy. Mm-hmm. So often ideas, they might be wrong in the setting in which they were applied, but they're mathematically correct. They'll probably crop up somewhere. And how the universe got spots is a reference to the fact that how the leopard got its spots has something to say about the same kinds of geometry. It's
just talk about that a little bit, because that was so completely fascinating.
Yeah. So, and this is due to Turing, which by coincidence is the character's name in my second book, Alan Turing, who's a great code breaker, a brilliant mathematician. But he realized that something called the Turing mechanism, which is when animals form in vitro, or in utero, rather. In vitro, why not? It's New York.
The natural way.
So the shape of the developing embryo, the shape and size, and the connectedness of the developing embryo determines how the pattern of spots or stripes are set on the animal, determines whether it has leopard spots or zebra stripes, and exactly where they're oriented in the shape and size. And there's something similar that we're talking about in the universe. The universe has a certain shape and size when it's born. It has a certain number of dimensions, a certain connectedness, and that's going to imprint little hot and cold spots in the sky left over from the Big Bang and leave a pattern of spots on the universe's coat, so to speak. So it's a similar mechanism.
That's so chilling. That's just such a... When I read that, I just couldn't... Plus this... can you talk a little bit about these turtles as well?
Oh, my turtles. Oh,
yeah.
Those turtles. Yeah. That's kind of tough. I can talk about the turtles.
Because I thought you were going to do that Hindu myth about the origin of the world, which is like how does the world... what's the world on top of? And it's on top of a turtle. What's that on top of? Well, it's turtles all the way down. You know, that famous Hindu little nursery rhyme. But this, I have to say, I have to read this probably 10 more times to even get the gist of what you're saying. But I'm really looking forward to that. But could you?
I can try the turtles. Yeah, I can try the turtles. Okay, so the idea is that if you live in a finite universe, that even light is forced to wrap around the space. So if the universe is finite, you know, the Earth is finite, right? So you leave Spain in a boat and you go off sail to discover the new world, and you find that you come back to where you started. You don't go on forever, and you don't fall off the edge of the Earth. It's neither flat with an edge, nor is it infinite. It's, in fact, nice and finite and compact. You come back to where you started. And we're imagining the same thing for the universe. If you left in a rocket, if you go see that video that Tim was describing, you'll see moving off away from the Earth, away from the Milky Way galaxy. You go off in a rocket. If the universe were truly finite, the Milky Way would approach in front of you again. You don't turn left, you don't turn right, you don't stop. You're just going straight, 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 and here it comes again, the Milky Way, because you've gone around the entire finite space. And even light has to do that. So that means that light from the Milky Way galaxy is leaving, and if the universe is finite, it's going to wrap around the universe and come back to us one day. And one day we're going to look out and see light that took 1 billion years to get to us because the journey was so long, and it's going to be ourselves, the Milky Way, only it's going to be 1 billion years ago. It's going to be very hard to recognize that was the Milky Way. The turtles are in a very little universe. The only thing, it's like a Borges story or something. The only thing in that universe is the turtle, and the light leaves the turtle's face, and it wraps around and hits him in the back, and the light from the back of his head leaves and wraps around, and he's looking at the back of his head, so everywhere he looks, he sees a copy of himself. It's like a hall of mirrors. He looks up, he sees copies of himself, he looks left, he looks right, and he sees those copies going on forever, and the further away they are, the longer it took the light to get to him, so the younger he was, you know. He can watch things happening to him, unfolding in the distance. He can wave, and all his copies will slowly wave at him, you know, each one further away, seeming to wave later. So that's the story with the turtles.
Confusing. This is so pointless, that what I'm going to say now, but it just reminded me of my favorite turtle story, which was a trick that Brian Eno played on his roommate, which he had who had turtles and was a real turtle lover, and each day he got 30 turtles, all different sizes. And each day he would put another smaller turtle into the terrarium, and the guy was like, "God!" And then he'd go the other way.
What did he do with the turtles?
That was a whole, you know, you have a lot of time in college to, you know, do schemes like that. You know, 30 different sized turtles. Also, when you talked about, it was really pointless. Edwin Abbott is one of my favorite writers. How many people have read Flatland?
Flatland. Yeah. Edwin Abbott. This the 1882 satire of living in a flatland. Yeah, all the characters are are like polygons, simple-sided. And the higher up you are in society, the more sides you have. So our hero is like a middle-class square, and then there's like an octagon, and and the priests have so many sides they look like circles, right? And women.
The women are just straight lines.
Yeah, they're just lines. They have no sides at all. It was a satire.
And they're dangerous, though. They're the only really dangerous ones, right?
Yeah, if their husbands came home early, they got pierced from this because they couldn't see their wives edge on. Mortally wounded. There was
Life
a
in
law that the women
Flatland.
had to wag their tails so that they could be visible at all times.
Right. But then you had some beautiful diagrams of a sphere, what it would be like if let's say we lived in a universe of 27 dimensions and we just were only aware of these three. If we were flatlanders, what would would the results be? So you have this sphere casting a two-dimensional shadow, and then the image of a lot of fragments of arms coming up around it somehow.
Yeah. I mean, they would only see the cross section.
Yeah, you'd always just
you'd only see the
fractured
cross section.
things.
So as you passed through, you would just be, a knee and then a cross section and then, a cross section, and that's all that they could possibly perceive. But it raises questions about our own universe because there might be extra dimensions. So as we only perceive three, I mean, I don't have a language for extra dimensions other than mathematics. I can't point to it. I can't see it, I can't describe it, but I know that at every point in space, if there's extra ones, they'd be right there at every single point in space, that extra direction. And if things were to cross through, things like strings might look like points, and might look like particles to us, when really they were strings or something like that.
So you're saying they wouldn't have to rely on memory or the stories of history to place themselves in context. They could use binoculars or telescopes to look back and watch history play itself out, which would be wonderful if you just go back. And I think didn't you use the image of, what was that, maybe JFK? Did you use that?
Oh yeah, you could go back and resolve the JFK story by looking far enough back in time in a finite universe with a good enough telescope, right? But the question about our own universe is more of one: why is it so big? Why is the universe so vast? And
compared to.
Well, good question. Compared to what?
Yeah.
And you could say, well, compared to us, big deal, right? I mean, why should it's vast to us? But I don't know. There are big structures. Maybe it doesn't seem so vast on bigger and bigger structures. There are these ideas that the entire universe is like a giant computer program being executed. And I don't mean in the corny sci-fi sense, but I mean really like it's just executing rules and churning through. And in some sense, it's unfolding towards some end. So it's almost like an organism. And there are
That's
questions.
Very dreary.
It is, but there's
no, or do you?
Well, I think that there's interesting questions about, when are you just part of? And Mark Quinn, the artist Mark Quinn, I think says interesting things about this when he did Bloodhead and he cast his own blood in his head, and it's an interesting dialogue about when am I just a blood cell and when am I an entire being, and when am I alive, and when am I not alive? When did that blood cease to be alive, and why isn't it animated or animate, and why am I? And so there are questions about being part of a complex whole and being unaware of being part of that complex whole.
But why wouldn't awareness come into that as an answer? I mean, I don't, because you feel you are. That's an answer, no?
Well, yeah, I mean, in the same sense that like subsets of our brain feel aware, but maybe aren't totally aware. I don't know, maybe do you feel like, don't you feel like there's parts of your own mind even that aren't completely accessible to you?
Yes, there are.
Got me there. So here you are being aware inside a bigger organism without being fully in control of that whole organism.
Well, but yeah, of course, what fully means as well compared to what as well. But, I do feel that I am able to use my own mind to look at it, which is a miracle. I mean, so I don't feel like there are these. I know that there are things that are not very accessible, but I think that I could. I think that human beings will be able to somehow. Well, I think I have some idea of progress in that way.
Well, this is
in
a kind
terms
of question.
Of awareness.
This is a kind of question that I get asked, so I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
Do you feel that there are limitations to what we can really understand? Like people say you can't ask questions about that because that is just outside of human scope. Human beings should not be asking questions about, the origin of the universe or the fate of the universe, whatever. Do you think that there's anything like that?
And it's going to cause harm to who if they do ask a question?
Well,
I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Of course you can, and like you say, wrong answers can be beautiful, and we're never going to know anyway. And does it? And aesthetically, frankly, this idea of finite to me seems very lovely. You know, it's a very lovely idea to bend back, and then it is where, you know. So anyway, would we ever be able to understand that? Do you know the book Sum? It's a book called 40 Different Afterlives, and Eagleman. And it's a lovely book about, I suppose, time, the way most, you know, just a lot of scenarios about what the afterlife. And one of them, the afterlife is, you wake up and you're surrounded by a bunch of small purple worms who are your creators. You realize your creators are small purple worms. And they're screaming like, what are we doing here? What's the answer? What are we about? And you're like so shaken because you just died, you know, and you're not used to, but they're constantly screaming, what are we doing here? And so you look around and you notice that a lot of them are crying, and you're kind of like, what? And you realize that they're crying because they think that we know the answers and that they are just too stupid to understand them. So that's like fills them with grief. So anyway, will we be able to understand everything? I'm an artist, so I think of myself as a kind of god.
She said that to me earlier, and I'm glad she said it out loud.
Because, you know, we make something where there was nothing. There was nothing there before, and you make something. That's very godlike, you know, without being, you know, worshiping yourself, which would be, but it is the power to create something that's there it is, and you can actually then show it to another one of your fellow purple worms, and they go, I know what you're talking about. So, you know, there is exchange, and those are things that I think, if we look at evolution, are becoming more and more subtle and more that I had a kind of really difficult conversation about this once, because I was doing an interview with John Cage, and there was a question that I really wanted to ask him, which was about shape, I suppose. Yeah. And basically the question was, do you think things are getting better or are they getting worse? But it was such a stupid question. You know, how are you going to ask somebody that? You know, it's just... So I tried to...
Did you ask? Okay.
I talked around it, you know. I was like, you know, chattering around it like, well, you know, it's true that a modern horse runs faster than a prehistoric horse, so maybe we're getting faster and smarter and better. And then, well, on the other hand, you know, there were... Why didn't we evolve to be fire-breathing animals like we were mythologically? You know, it would be very handy to be able to cook your food, you know, boom, you know, I didn't have to. So why didn't we go that if everything's for the better and everything's getting faster and better and good, more good? And he's like, and I'm chattering on, and he's going, what are you trying to say? You know, what are you asking me? And I said, well, okay, are things getting better or are they getting worse? And he didn't really even hesitate. He just said, oh, and because he had this, like, he always would smile like that, with his mouth open, like, even when he was 80, when a lot of people are so depressed they want to blow their brains out, you know, he was happy, you know. I was so touching. He was happy to be there, happy to be thinking. He said, oh, they're getting better. And I was like, and I don't know why I was so happy to hear that, but, you know, it gave me a lot of kind of confidence somehow in the ability to, you're not going to know either way. So it's a really question of aesthetics. You know, do you want to be miserable or would you like to be happier? So, you know, so choose to be happy. You know. So anyway, or choose any of these models that you like that will give you a certain. I mean, I don't want to be like simple-minded, but I think that we're here to be really happy. We're not here to like just suffer. We're here to be happy. And
so we're conquering free will and the meaning of life. That's oh
yeah. Anyway, this is. I think this book is so full of those kinds of daring ways of like asking questions. It really made me happy to read it, and also, I mean, somewhat unhappy because I didn't understand a lot of it. I have to say, but it's like it's really gorgeous when you watch somebody kind of going, and then or that or that or that. You know, it's like it's a very freeing experience to read the book.
Well, I think that's sort of the industry also of that particular subject, you know, asking about the origin of the universe or cosmology, the evolution of the universe. There's sort of an inside joke that we're free of observational constraints, we're free of facts, you know, forcing us into a position. So there is, which isn't completely true, it's been an era of really successful observational astronomy. You know, observational astronomers would kill me if I said something like that, but they, you know, great discoveries and really showing us where we have to kind of buckle down and stick to it. But there is this huge question of how the universe began and whether it was the first time the Big Bang ever happened, or if we're just part of a series of Big Bangs, if there are other universes out there literally and, you know, kind of ginger root sense connected to us through the past. And these are all things that we can talk about as long as they're realistically or mathematically consistent, and wonder if any of them are true. And it might be questions, you know, we can actually answer in our lifetime, which is quite remarkable. I mean, could we answer the question of how the universe began, or is the universe infinite or finite? Are there extra dimensions? And the idea that, you know, Flatland was this great satire and this beautiful kind of novelette, I get novella about it, but that we are in some sense might be flatlanders in a higher dimensional world, and that we could even learn this is, you know, it's pretty. It makes you feel connected to the universe in a deeper way. I think it makes you feel connected to the whole cycle of it all from beginning to this end, and you know, maybe even projecting about what our fate will be as it unfolds. I mean, you talk about the process of evolution and where we stand in the scheme of things, and yet we might be unsuccessful as a species. I mean, we don't have a great track record. The dinosaurs, you know, 250 million years those beasts roamed the earth, and, you know, they were solid. We're nowhere near 250 million years, right?
Well, one of the things that I find kind of upbeat on it is it plans that, you know, like some of these kind of mythical think tank things at NASA that have these very, very long timelines, which is one is a 10,000-year timeline for the greening of Mars. So that we're going to be going somewhere, and Mars is probably, for one reason or another, Mars is a very good candidate. So it's about, you know, terraforming Mars. There'll be stuff for us when we get there. You know, now that we know so much about taking care of planets, we're going to take care of Mars. So, yeah, you know, when we go somewhere, you know, it would be, I just hope a lot of people get in on that decision about what kind of other worlds we're going to be making, and not just the technocrats, you know, so that everybody gets a chance to make another world, you know, because we will be making other worlds, most likely, yeah. And what would that be like? What do we like about this one that we'd want to take to another one, you know? And what's worth it that we've learned that could be applied there, you know, other than our just workaholic ethic and all of this kind of stuff that we want to, is that what we want to bring there, you know? What do you like about this? What do you want, you know, another world to be? So I think it would be great if more people, you know, had that sort of discussion, because it's anyway, and contributed to it, not just let it sort of happen, you know.
So that was a big program while you were at NASA, that they were talking about the Mars.
They were, yeah, the greening of Mars is actually, there's a timeline, and it's 10,000 years long.
Yeah.
It's 10,000 year
very
timeline.
optimistic.
Yeah, it's, you know, and it's, why not?
Yeah. So you were asking me about, you know, folding in personal into the novels, and I wanted to ask you also about how you draw from so many different things. I mean, you're a musician and a writer and a visual artist, and in drawing on all these things, I mean, when you're choosing your medium and you're thinking about, even in response to NASA, to choose the poem, to choose the poem and not the multimedia exercise. I mean, how does that play out for you, choosing between all of those different skill sets that you have, all those abilities that you have? I mean, how do you hone in and decide on the poem, in a sense?
Just chance. No, just what's the answer? I mean, I don't have a big plan. A lot of times, when I made big plans, I've been very disappointed. It's just you have these expectations, and then you have to kind of move yourself into that thing, and then you have to sort of look for what you think you might see. So it becomes claustrophobic. So in trying to maintain this balance between looking and discovering and wanting and desiring, it's a tricky thing. So I've had the experience sometimes of starting out to write an opera and ending up with like a potato print, and then I'm just kind of try to be happy with that, because it's okay, except for the people who paid for the opera. It's like, we thought this was gonna be. This is it. Okay. Yeah, so, the curses of being a multimedia artist are they are like that. And sometimes I wish that I was just like luthier sounds nice.
Yeah, I know.
It really does.
Yeah, just go into your back room.
One beautiful craft, one beautiful sound, and they're just I don't know.
Well, there's something interesting to me about it in terms of the idea of being constrained and being constrained creativity. The idea that you have to be very clear on the choices you make. You don't just go up there and draw on everything, just because you can, just because you're able to. That you choose the potato print or the opera or whatever it is. There's a lot of constraints involved in being creative in that way, and I think that was something that before I was embroiled in something like math or physics, I didn't fully appreciate how effective that is on both sides, as for arts as well as for science. And there's something about that that's kind of thrilling. As a scientist, the rigidity of the constraints, working within the mathematics can defeat you completely, and being forced to respect that and yet still finding big shapes, big ways of solving things that no one did before, or drawing on ideas that just hadn't crossed people's minds that get you from A to B right there, and as opposed to the long way around, and that kind of beautiful aspect of creativity under extreme constraint is something that I think is kind of underappreciated.
Yeah, but I'm sort of surprised you say that, because this really is pretty daring. The universe is finite. I mean, that's like there are very few things that you could say that would be more like, really, prove it or something. I don't know what you'd say to that, but except that I really admire it. That just to say, well, if it were like that, what would that be like? So, the constraints as a kind of structure to work within. It just depends on how big that box is. I think because this is not. You're certainly citing a lot of people who. Let's call them authorities for a second, and appreciating your work. But this is not a work that is about constraint or it's very authoritative, and daring. So anyway, also your comment on the constraints, it doesn't make sense to me.
Well, in a sense, I'm working within a lot of constraints mathematically, even just and working within those confines and trying to find ways of visualizing or imagining that the universe can be, but still adhering.
But mathematics doesn't say that the universe is finite.
No, it doesn't. That's right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So
it's your speculation around
absolutely.
That.
And even now, it's hard to. The universe is clearly very, very big. It's at least hundreds of millions of light years across, and probably billions of light years across. So even if it is finite, I mean, it's big, right? And it would take light from our own Milky Way billions of years to come back to us and see it again. But the lucky thing is in the past the universe was smaller. So light could cross around in some sense depending on how the universe evolved. But it might be so big that we never actually see all the way around the universe. And that, like I said, was one of the motivations for writing the book, because you just don't want these ideas just to evaporate. But more and more people talk about this idea of extra dimensions. It sounds really crazy and science fiction-y, but it's a very interesting possibility. And when you ask about making creative leaps, and that's one of the things that's really fun to imagine playing with, because consequences come from that you couldn't possibly foresee. For instance, light itself looks to us like a phenomena that we understand. There's this beam of light coming at me from the wall, and I think I understand it. But if the universe has extra dimensions, you can prove that you might mistake something going on spatially in that extra dimension for something that we call light, that these extra dimensions can camouflage themselves in some sense as particles or as light itself. And so the whole structure of the world as we understand it, why are there electrons, why is there light, why is there matter, why is there energy, could find some deeper unifying understanding if we just brought in a few extra spatial dimensions for the one low price of some extra spatial dimensions. Yeah. And obviously I'm talking about a projected aim, because if it was all solved, you'd be reading about it in the paper, but it's not a completely solved idea, and people have been working on it for 100 years, and something I'm just starting to get into working on, but where you can make really beautiful creative leaps there, where you just see something that even after 80 years somebody didn't see, and yet to really try to make it so that it would be confirmed one day, like you could show that it was real. I mean, that would be the real clincher for me. And I think that's again, one of those things that really attracted me to science. One, that it didn't care what I believed one way or another, which in a way was kind of exciting, that nature didn't care what I believed, and that it was transcendent, that everyone was forced to agree on it, and that one day you might have an idea that turns out to be true. It's pretty exciting.
Shall we see whether people beyond this fourth wall, this finite wall,
sure.
have an idea about this fascinating engagement here? It's gone in so many directions, and yet it's actually kept very close to the essence of what we started out with. So maybe it is coming round and round. So we have microphones on either side of the house. And so all I'd ask is that you raise your hands, and we'll identify you in pairs, one on this side and one on that side, and we'll alternate all the way through. So if we have some questions, we can... Yes, we have a question here. Take that microphone if you don't mind. And anybody else? Anyone else following up? Okay, question there. So first of all, this gentleman. There's the mic on.
Thank you. I have a bunch of questions, but let me start with
one per person.
One, I know.
Laurie only got like 2
Laurie's
out
allowed
of 6.
600.
You've talked a lot about truth and mathematics, for example, and one of the, I guess when the Big Bang occurred and the universe, sort of started to evolve, if it happened in a slightly different way, as I understand it, and I could be wrong, but none of this could be happening. The universe wouldn't have its spots, I guess you might say.
Yeah.
And if that were true, if that occurred, and it might have happened somewhere else, perhaps in the other dimensions, well, maybe not, but anyway, if that happened, would mathematics still be true? Would 1 and 1 equal 2? Because there wouldn't be anything relating itself to each other. And if that's still true, does it still have meaning?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. When I talk about truth, I'm not being completely glib. Like, I understand how difficult a concept that is, and that people can take you to task. Like, how do you know this is real? How do I know you're there? How do I know any of y'all aren't just in my mind? I'm having like a narcissistic moment or something, But then I'm thinking about functional truth. I just really mean in a more humble way, just functional truth. Like, I'm pretty sure my key's going to open my door tonight, and in that sense, that's the right key, and that's true. So roughly functionally, but you're asking about a much deeper question, which is, If the laws of physics could be different, if I can create a universe and I make gravity a little bit stronger, and I make electricity and magnetism weaker, I mean, it's all gone, it's all over. There's no Earth. As far as we've been able to figure out, you wouldn't get atoms and molecules, and there's no people here to have this conversation, and but it's a viable universe, I suppose. So that universe might be out there, and it evolves, but it doesn't evolve with people in it to reflect back and ask questions about it. Now, that might be a possibility, but what you're asking is even more, because I can totally imagine the laws of physics changing. I have a hard time imagining math changing. And I don't know what's different about mathematics, and I'm not sure. There are philosophers of mathematics who could give you a really good answer right now. And like if this was a game show, I could call them up. Like what's that called? And you can call the person at home. I know who I'd call at home. Give me a great answer. It's a very deep question about mathematical truth. It does. I believe that 1 + 1 is 2 on another planet. I count planets. There's 1, there's 2. That seems to be evidence that 1 + 1 is still 2 over there. But I don't know that the laws of physics are the same over there, actually. I entertain the possibility that gravity might be different over there, stronger or weaker, or something like that. So I don't even know how to consider a world where the math isn't the same, if that makes sense.
Let's have the other question. You've got the microphone.
Speaking about different dimensions, other dimensions and stuff, wouldn't that just be influenced by your state of consciousness? As like when I used to do LSD. This whole dimension, all these people, everything here, appeared different to me. Appeared a whole other dimension.
Well, I think you should come back for the brain conversation for sure. You don't know what's going to be on those smelling sticks. So, but I'd
or
like
the Red
to,
Book, because you'll see this in your sleep. You see this room in a different way too. It's a different. If you don't call it dimension, maybe It's like, but
then it's she's talking about facts, and math is a fact that she believes is definite, but David says like facts all come with points of view. So, facts really aren't true.
Well, we say universal truth of our universe. Can you imagine a universe that didn't have to do with math, that was like all based on like rumor?
I can imagine it.
Yeah. So,
but even if you try to write narratives like that, and there have been some really clever, like Borges does some really interesting things playing on ideas like that. But somewhere in there is mathematical logic still. Like we can't escape our own minds.
But you're not sure of that, are you?
No, I'm not sure of anything.
I think that's the important thing, just to not. I mean, math is a standard that But let me ask you, what is that cliche about? We only know that 90% of matter. That's
Right.
That, I mean, 90% of our universe is
made up
not
of ordinary
available
stuff.
to us.
Right.
When we're blithely making all of these rules and constants and so on, only knowing less than 10% of what we're in the middle of, who do we think we are? I mean,
But that was the question I asked you previously about, do you think that we have no business asking these questions? But I should say in defense of us little specks of dust, we are only 5% of what makes up the universe as far as we can tell, that there's 95% is stuff that's not in this room, or if it is, we can't tell it's in this room. It's dark stuff, it doesn't emit light, it doesn't reflect light, we can't see it with our telescopes directly. And as far as we can tell, it's a different form of matter and energy, dark matter and dark energy, that make up the rest of the stuff. Now, people say, aha, you know nothing. and just in defense of the observational astronomers, they discovered that. It's only because of how well they know the things that they know that they could ascertain, and it's only in the past 10 years or so that, in fact, there's dark matter and dark energy out of it.
how did they hit on that actual percentage?
That's a good question. I mean, they look out at some of it is just because we have a good estimate of what was synthesized in the origin of the universe. When the universe was first created and it cooled down, it's mostly hydrogen and helium, and we have very good measures of primordial stuff. Like you can find astrophysical objects that are just made out of primordial material, the stuff of the very early universe. We're not. We're made up, as you said, out of stardust. We're made up out of stuff that was burnt through thermonuclear fusion in the cores of stars and then ejected back out into space. So there's a lot of things like that. Like we can tell very much how much of the universe could be in hydrogen or helium and the rest of the stuff. And then we can measure the weight of the other stuff by looking at how light bends around it and how it's gravitationally affecting other stuff. And you can weigh it in that sense. And
So you have confidence in that.
yeah, I mean, dark energy, we're not as confident. I mean, I wouldn't say dark energy is on the same level as everything else. We might be wrong about dark energy. But it's getting more and more convincing. Dark matter lately, and it's just getting really convincing. You can see two galaxies pass through each other, where the luminous matter is lit up, and the dark matter's just got nothing to do with it. And you can see the dark matter because it's bending light all around it. It's just casting a shadow in some sense. It's a big lens out in space, a big gravitational lens. So it's getting really hard to get around the dark matter. And it's fascinating. It is. It's fascinating. But maybe we'll see it at the colliders. Maybe we'll see it in laboratories. If we take it seriously. I mean, the universe is a big, laboratory in some sense.
We've got a question here, and Vicky, we've got a question right in the back row with the hand up there. Madam.
I would like to get your opinion on something I heard a physicist, astronomy graduate student theorize about, which I guess is a current idea, but it's so beautiful in its symmetry, I wonder about it, which is the dark holes, which are, infinite density, pulling infinite gravity, pulling everything in. That the other side of that is what's called a white hole, where everything is going out.
Right.
That
Like a
was
Big
sucked
Bang.
in, like in another universe, and that perhaps the beginning of our universe, the Big Bang, was a white hole.
Yeah.
Is this...
It's theorized about, but the reason why it doesn't ever gain any traction is because in some sense we don't really know where to go with it from there. But yeah, it's with a black hole, once you cross inside the black hole, we have no access to what's going on inside there. And we think of it as this sphere, so how could there be a whole universe inside there? But actually you can sew a whole universe inside there as though that singularity just bursts out and all that stuff that fell into the black hole spews out in a kind of Big Bang sort of event called a white hole into another maybe another part of space-time that's really disconnected from us. Like we're just shielded from it. These are possibilities. These are fun things to think about, and they seem like you can make them consistent, but I'm not really sure where we go with that. We don't know how to fit them in.
It's not something that can be mathematically dealt with.
It can be. But it it can be mathematically dealt with in the sense like pretend there's an energy source that magically does this thing. Okay, we can pretend that, and mathematically make it consistent. But we don't know that there's such an energy source or that it would sew on that way. It doesn't follow as inevitable from what we do know.
But
I guess that's what I would say.
splattering the walls of the laboratory.
Yeah, well, it would sort of...
But what about it being a living thing? Perhaps instead of a laboratory. I mean, your model is a laboratory. I could see as a mathematician, it's a nice way to see the universe. But what if it's not at all like that? But it's actually perhaps breathing. And do you,
people do theorize.
To me, that's more appealing than a laboratory. I don't know why, but because I'm living, I guess, and I want to be part of something living, not some formula, I suppose. Actually, I don't mind being a formula. So
there is some sense in which not all of astrophysics, but a lot of astrophysics is about non-living things. People can find that cold and austere. There is a whole obvious intent towards understanding things like astrobiology and stuff, and that's become very serious. Like we've spent a lot of
astrobiology.
Astrobiology is pretty amazing. People talk about whether or not DNA really originated or RNA really originated on Earth. I mean, it's possible. I don't think it's necessarily the way it went, but that it originated on comets and sizzled there, and the proteins formed, and then it smashes into the Earth and gets deposited here. So there's really interesting things about the emergence of life, for sure, that start with that perspective, that big space perspective.
Should we take the question at the back?
Yeah, I had a question. In terms of posing the question, is the universe infinite or finite? That seems like a very binary approach, and especially because of the brainwave and sort of the more Buddhist idea of like a non-dual universe, it's finite and infinite seem like a concept that Homo sapiens have constructed. And so trying to reduce the universe to something that's either one or the other, why couldn't it be both? And in posing the question, aren't you kind of forced to confront the limitations of our brain as opposed to the structures of the universe?
Over to you.
Oh, you're the Buddhist.
Oh, Lord.
Well, I'd be happy to hear anyone who can make the universe finite and infinite at the same time. I mean, I'd be happy to hear that. It'd be interesting if somebody could construct something that made sense. We have dualities that we have to deal with and that are foisted on us, whether we want them or not. The wave-particle duality of quantum mechanics. I want to think something's one or the other, but I can't. I have to think that a particle is also a wave, and it's really contradictory. It's deeply incompatible, yet I have to accept it. And, I'm happy to consider if somebody can do something interesting and constructive. I couldn't. I mean, I don't mean couldn't ever, but I mean I couldn't up to now. I didn't find anything there. But for your latter question, also, maybe we have limitations of our mind, sure. But like you said, well, that's my job. And,
It's also the job of poets, too, who there's just the image that I love. One of the images I love the most is the attempt of poets or writers or artists to make a situation where you are holding two absolutely opposing ideas or images, and that you're able, that it's done so well that you're able to hold them both without going crazy. And humans have that ability to have these opposing things. They're both right, We are. So I love works of art that use that opposition, so-called opposition, as a kind of a method of how they work, and then they kind of go back and forth, and they kind of go yes but no, but yes but no, and then you're left not with a resolution, but with this way to balance, things. And I find that when I see a work of art that does that, I'm totally thrilled, because it rips me apart, and I'm just like so grateful because it feels like so much of what you see and experience that those things are happening, and how do you absorb them without kind of going, okay, here's my conclusion, my one conclusion, but that you're able to do that and still, with acceptance, and still stay sane.
Mm-hmm.
Before we go to the next set of questions, I just want to throw in something here. I always view these programs, these series such as Brainwave, as really stepping stones through a very fast-flowing stream, and they're there to guide you across while you know that the next big flood will sweep them all away. and I would just recommend if people are interested in exploring the notion of astrobiology, Chris Impey is going to be here on April the 10th with Michael Joaquin Gray, who is an artist, also a conceptual artist, but also in his own way, a scientist who's constructed life organism tools called Zoop. And they're going to construct an organism on stage together as part of their conversation. So that's April 10th. I'm just throwing that out there. I think it's going to be very odd and interesting. But anyway, so let's take, yes, I know you wanted to ask a question. Let's get that gentleman back there, and let's come to you next, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm really looking forward to reading the book. And kind of piggybacking on that question, I guess I'm still having trouble thinking. We've been talking about the possibility of the universe being finite, but I don't see, I can't see any way that you can, to say something is finite, you're setting a border, a boundary between something and something else. And then I want to hear more about the science of what stops the boundary, what stops the next thought, which is that if there's a boundary, then there's something beyond the boundary.
Right, that's one of the reasons why I think the idea was very limited for a long time, because people couldn't imagine, like when you imagine traveling on the Earth, if you thought it was finite back in Spain, several hundred years ago, you'd worry that there was just an edge, a boundary, just an edge, and that you'd fall off that edge. But we know that, in fact, the Earth's much more elegant than that. It's reconnected to itself. You don't have an edge. You just are on a curved surface that comes back to where it started. This is much harder to do. When I'm looking at the Earth, I'm cheating because I have this privileged perspective as a three-dimensional being looking down on this two-dimensional surface. But in our universe, we want to try to imagine being in a higher dimension and seeing it bent into four. But mathematically, you don't have to do that. Actually, it's perfectly consistent to have a space that's three-dimensional and three-dimensional only that wraps back onto itself, but doesn't have to bend into a fourth dimension to do it. If you remember your old video games, the really old ones, like you'd run off one side of the video and you'd come back in on the other side, that was a finite space that was not bent into three dimensions. So that was a finite two-dimensional space that was not bent into three. And so that's kind of what you're imagining. You could tile. We have these tiling pictures as ways of understanding it, which is, I think, very useful. And the turtles is an example of a tiling. It's flat, it's not bent into another direction, and the turtle just moves along and never feels a boundary at all. What he just doesn't realize is he's just coming back to where he started. Right, in some sense it is infinite. It does have an infinite element, which is that if that turtle's there forever, there are an infinite number of copies of him. But if he's only there for a finite time, then there are only a finite number of copies of him. That he'll see, just like in a hall of mirrors, it just keeps going, literally forever. And as long as the light lasts and you're there for long enough with enough light, you can fill the whole universe could be bright with your one little flashbulb, So yeah, there are notions of infinity in it, but they're usually temporal. They're usually require an infinite amount of time, and that's something that somehow seems a little more natural. I don't know, maybe.
You mean infinite time seems okay to you?
I'm not sure, because probably before an infinite, what is that Woody Allen line? Like eternity is a very long time, especially the bit towards the end. Or something. That bit towards the end, like before you get there. At any finite moment in our future history, if the universe lives forever, if it doesn't recollapse or get annihilated or something like that happen, probably it would be very hard to talk about time. I mean, it'll be expanding so slowly that you won't notice any change. All the life forms will have evaporated, all the stars will have run out of fuel, and all black holes will have evaporated, and basically it'll just be about as mixed up as it can be, and there'll be no change. I think it'd be very hard-pressed to define a notion of time in that universe. Mm-hmm. Now, time can keep going by restarting. The whole universe can collapse. Maybe there'll be another Big Bang, and it'll all start over again. It'll be great, Everything will be a little different. But that's in some sense like restarting the clock. So
a lot of your models are loop-like things, and I think there's something very comforting about that.
Yeah,
kind of thing. Or you listen to a loop, and there's something like really we can respond to that and understand how that could somehow.
Well, if you ask about the intuition, I mean, intuitively, wouldn't that be a nice idea? The universe started over again. It went back to a big crunch. It started over again. This wasn't the only time it happened. I mean, it would be a nice idea, but I don't know.
I could be convinced of that as nice, but I like. But one of the reasons I don't like intermissions is it's really hard to start things, and it's really hard to find a good end, and then if you have an intermission, you have to do that twice. So also, I'm not so in love with, here we are, it's the start of the show, I could get over that. I could, I'm
well, good, because it might not be the truth.
Yeah, I'm attracted to the loop as well, just being part of that stream of just continuous action forever.
So we're going to take a quick break now. All right, next two questions. Yes, this gentleman. Oh, sorry. Yes, you're there, and then keep your hand up because the mic will come to you. Anyone? And yes, ma'am, you. Okay, thank you.
I have a question about dimensions. Now, our concept of dimensions seems to be based on a straight line, like a series of straight lines at different angles. Mm-hmm. But according to your definition, if the universe is finite, then everything is curved. All the straight lines are curved. So what does that do to our concept of dimension?
Well, you're going to make me say something very formal, but strictly speaking, if I find a small enough patch of any space at all, I can set up exactly what you're talking about, those perfectly perpendicular lines that define all my dimensions on a small enough region. And even Einstein said that even if space-time is curved, and I have to move that, change that orientation as I roll along, like something bobbling on waves, I have to change the orientation, so be it. But at any given point in space, if I look small enough, I can define that perfect, rigid, perpendicular dimensions. And so the dimensions do hold in that sense. There's always going to be the same number at any point that you can do that for, at any point in space, even if you then have to curve it to move between the points. It's actually, does it sound like cheating? You want to set up, but it still says, maybe another way, although I don't think that's cheating, because I think it really beautifully speaks to why it might appear to us that the universe isn't curved where we live now, but we realize, it took us all these years of civilization and somebody to realize, it's curved, black holes curve space and the universe expands and all this stuff. And part of that's because this illusion works very well right where we are. So it actually has a root in that. But if you like this answer better, to tell you where you are in the universe, no matter where you are in the universe, I would have to specify a certain number of conditions, and they would always be the same. So for instance, where are we? 17th Street, so that tells where we are north-south, right? We're roughly at 7th Avenue. Roughly. That tells us where we are east-west. We're downstairs. That tells us where we are up-down. And you had to say 6 p.m. because it could have been 10,000 BC. And so you name those 4 things, and that's how you specify where we are. Boom. And you will need those 4 things no matter where you are. So in some sense, that's also a measure of the number of dimensions. 3 space, 1 time. And maybe 6 others.
It's those 6 others.
We're down to 6.
Make it interesting.
Well, it's no longer 6 p.m. It's almost 7:30.
Yeah, we got to
which
go.
means it's time to
Finite.
Yes, it is finite. This experience. So where did we have the other microphone? Okay. Yes, you go, sir.
My mother was telling me the other day that when I was young, probably 5, 6, 7, I got very, very upset because someone told me about the universe being potentially infinite, and yet it was growing, which was very confusing to me. But I sort of, I kind of learned about infinity and how it worked. What I'm kind of curious about is the emotional reaction to the idea of a cyclical universe when you are a Buddhist and there's a kind of a wheel and you kind of want to get off that cycle. And I mean, this is very much sounding like that kind of conflict, that that feeling of going around in circles. So how do you feel about that? See, it's a question for you.
Feel good about that. I do. That particular question, I think, would be at least a whole evening. So I'm going to. I actually have to go. So I'm going to just bow out of that particular one.
They're all disappointed. Did you hear that collective sigh?
Really? Oh.
Well, the good thing is that Brainwave continues in various iterations, so do come to other programs. Janna, Laurie, thank you so much for this
has been
wonderful
fun.
engagement. Really, really good. Thank you.